Welcome, curious minds, to another deep dive.
Hello?
Today, we're embarking on a really fascinating journey. We're looking into the world of a popular online content creator, Mr. Beat.
That's right.
Our mission to really delve into a collection of his videos, pulling out the key nuggets of knowledge and, his perspectives on American history, society, current events.
And we're adding, well, a pretty unique layer here. We've also looked at Mr. Beat's content through the lens of an unexpected source and AI.
And AI, okay.
Yeah, so by examining his recurring themes, his stated methods, and then how this AI actually processes his insights, we think we can get a much richer understanding of how knowledge gets presented and consumed and maybe even critiqued in this digital age.
Right, how it all works online. So expect some aha moments, maybe some surprising facts, and definitely some thought-provoking questions. Questions about historical interpretation, critical thinking.
And even what expertise really means today.
Exactly. This isn't just about what Mr. Beat says, it's about how we all kind of digest and react to this kind of information. So let's jump in.
Let's do it.
Okay, so first, who is Mr. Beat? In his own words. He introduces himself as Mr. Beat. Specifically, he's the American president's guy.
Uh-huh.
And he's got a solid background for this, taught social studies, middle and high school for 12 years.
Right.
His videos cover a lot: economics, geography, American history, world history. He calls himself kind of an educated guy, uses words like erroneous, has a master's degree.
But he also downplays it a bit.
Yeah, he humbly admits he's probably not that smart, and even jokes that schooling is overrated.
It's interesting how he frames his whole approach, isn't it?
Yeah.
He makes it clear it's driven by his own curiosity, a love of learning. He wants to make dense topics interesting.
Which is a great goal for any educator.
Totally. And he's pretty transparent about his own views. He acknowledges his personal biases, political beliefs, how they influence his opinions. He literally says, I'm a little biased. We all are.
That upfront honesty is definitely part of his appeal, I think.
Yeah, and he even shared quite an emotional reaction he had once when researching every president's biggest mistake.
Yeah.
Said it left him feeling paranoid and negative.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Leading to that quip, everyone should be canceled.
Exactly. A bit tongue-in-cheek, but it shows the research can affect him personally.
So speaking of those biggest mistakes, he definitely has strong opinions there. How does he define a greatest mistake?
He says it's the one thing they did that hurt the most people. And he views this with my historian hat on, looking at all of American history.
Okay, a historical perspective focused on impact. And what themes emerge? You mentioned civil liberties earlier.
Yeah, it's a big one. He points to John Adams signing the Alien and Sedition Acts. He called those 4 of the worst laws in American history, especially the Sedition Act hurting the First Amendment.
Right. And even Lincoln.
Even Lincoln, yeah. Despite everything, Mr. Beat critiques his abuse of the First Amendment, arresting journalists, censoring mail during the Civil War.
So a consistent concern there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Civil liberties, individual rights. It's a clear thread. But it's not just that. His critiques often hit on economic missteps, too, and social justice issues.
Like the tariffs.
Exactly. His dislike for high tariffs comes up repeatedly. The tariff of 1828, the tariff of abominations, he argues, it just made things more expensive for ordinary folks.
And Smoot-Hawley.
Same deal. He thinks it made the Great Depression worse. But then, on the flip side, he says he's personally a fan of some parts of Reaganomics.
Oh, interesting. Like what?
Things like deregulation, tightening the money supply,
Yeah.
and reducing the federal income tax. But he adds that caveat, to a certain extent.
So it's a nuanced economic view, maybe even a bit complex or contradictory, depending on how you look at it.
You could say that. It shows he's not just following one simple party line.
He really does cover a wide range. He even gets into presidential intelligence and education.
Right, using those estimated IQs from Dean Keith Simonton, John Quincy Adams way up there near 169, Grant down at 120.
But he adds a disclaimer, right?
He does. He's careful to say IQ tests have flaws and should be looked at suspiciously, which is wise.
And he also notes how many presidents, like Washington or Lincoln, had little formal schooling but were clearly brilliant, self-taught, curious.
Which kind of echoes his own schooling is overrated comment, doesn't it?
It does. And then, totally shifting gears, he throws in presidential food preferences. Yes, the lighter side. Washington's hoe cakes, Jefferson loving mac and cheese.
Madison's oyster ice cream, really.
Apparently. And Garfield's squirrel soup, Reagan's jelly beans, George H.W. Bush hating broccoli.
It's quirky, but it rounds out the picture, makes these historical figures feel a bit more human, maybe? I think that's the idea. This mix of serious analysis and these, well, personal details and quirks, it helps you understand his particular lens.
And when he ranks his worst 10 American presidents, he focuses on character.
Yeah, character's big for him in those rankings.
Mm.
And it's notable he admits, personally liking George W. Bush, even while he's quite critical of his policies.
That definitely shows the human element, the personal perspective interacting with the historical judgment.
Exactly.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. How does Mr. Beat handle more complex social and political issues? Logical fallacies, for instance.
Oh, he tackles those head on. Has a whole video defining and illustrating them, using a specific Joe Rogan-Ben Shapiro discussion as a case study.
What kind of fallacies does he cover?
All the common ones, really.
Yeah.
Straw man twisting someone's argument, ad hominem attacking the person,
Yeah.
false equivalence, hasty generalization, appeal to fear. The list goes on.
And does he claim to be immune?
Not at all. That's what's striking. He explicitly tells his audience, I'm guilty of using logical fallacies myself. That's self-awareness again.
That's refreshing. What about something like the Jim Crow era?
He makes that very real by actually taking a Jim Crow-era literacy test himself. Calls it ridiculous, nearly impossible to pass. Yeah, and he cites that stat, 70% of constitutional law professors failed a similar test. It really drives home his point that these weren't tests of literacy. They were weapons meant to strip African Americans of their political power.
A powerful way to illustrate it. And anti-Semitism.
He digs into the history there. Early Christian discrimination, medieval stereotypes like the greedy moneylender, blaming Jews for the Black Death, and connects it even to modern anti-Zionism.
Any key takeaway from that?
His main insight, which is quite chilling, is people who dislike Jews rarely dislike only Jews. Suggesting it's often part of a broader pattern of prejudice.
That's a sobering thought. He also unpacks complex terms, right? Like the deep state.
Yes, he does a good job tracing that phrase. Starts with its Turkish origins, Derin Devlet, this idea of a shadow government.
And how does he apply it today?
He draws a distinction. There's the real deep state, as he calls it, intelligence agencies like the CIA, FBI, NSA, operating secretly since World War II, involved in controversial stuff, surveillance. And then there's the fake deep state, in his view, which he says is just ordinary government bureaucrats who are not that secret at all, basically debunking some of the more extreme conspiracy theories.
That clarification seems important. What about modern challenges like AI in education?
He's definitely grappling with that, observes that AI is only getting better, and, maybe worryingly for educators, there are no effective AI detectors.
So what's his advice for teachers?
He suggests they need to adapt. Redefine the essay process, teach AI as a tool, create AI-resistant prompts, use authentic assessments, things AI can't easily fake, and really try to foster a culture of integrity and curiosity.
Practical advice. He also covered the Korean War.
He did, calling it the war Americans forgot about. He goes into the origins, the division at the 38th parallel, the U.S.-Soviet influence, the UN intervention, North Korean invasion, the Incheon landing, China getting involved, the stalemate, but also the devastating legacy.
How devastating.
1 to 3 million civilian deaths, he notes. Plus, it cemented the Cold War containment policy, set a precedent for undeclared wars, fueled the Second Red Scare here.
And he had a personal connection?
Yeah, he mentions his grandpa Beat served in the war. Adds that personal touch again.
It seems he even touches on current politics sometimes.
He does. He interviewed an early subscriber who's actually running for Congress. They talked about the real challenges, especially money. Paying a $10,000 filing fee versus gathering thousands of signatures.
Wow, that's a huge barrier.
Right. And they also touched on the need for authenticity, especially in what he called the Trump era.
Okay, so that gives us a really good picture of Mr. Beat's content and style. Now,
Yeah.
the AI critique. This sounds intriguing.
It really is. This AI, which describes its own process as perfectly evolved data processing, aiming for pure objectivity, no emotion, it definitely offers a different perspective.
How so? Does it just disagree with his conclusions?
It's more about the process and perceived inconsistencies. For example, it kind of flags Mr. Beat's emotional talk, his whining, as the AI source puts it, about being in a bad mood from research. He contrasts that with its own unemotional analysis.
So human feeling versus cold logic.
Pretty much. The AI questions the logic of his everyone should be canceled quip, seeing it as, well, maybe irrational, based purely on presidents making mistakes.
Okay, what else? Inconsistencies.
It points to that economic view we discussed. The strong dislike of tariffs versus being a personal fan of some Reaganomics aspects like deregulation and tax cuts. The AI source sees that as a walking contradiction.
Hmm. It highlights a tension there.
Exactly. And it picks up on the logical fallacies point, too. It finds irony in him teaching about fallacies while openly admitting I'm guilty of using logical fallacies myself and making generalizations.
Like the most human beings generalize
Yeah.
comment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The AI seems to question the rigor there. It also critiques his Squid Game video.
The one about presidents, what was the issue there?
The AI questioned the stated motivation getting his daughters to watch his channel, and it pointed out things it saw as inconsistent in the premise,
For example.
like using FDR's disability sometimes, but then suggesting the youth of Roosevelt helped win a tug-of-war game. The AI asks how age or physical condition can matter or not matter depending on the narrative need.
Questioning the internal logic of the thought experiment.
Right, and it found his assumption that these ruthless political figures dropped into a death game would act like decent men to be, well, naive from a purely analytical standpoint.
Interesting. What about the IQ stuff?
The AI notes he uses the estimated IQs even while saying they have flaws, and it sees a contradiction between citing IQ scores and saying schooling is overrated.
Trying to have it both ways, perhaps.
That seems to be the AI's implication. And on the Jim Crow literacy test.
Yeah.
The AI questions how big a revelation it was for Mr. Beat to find the test difficult. It argues the sources explicitly state the tests were designed to be discriminatory and impossible. So the AI suggests his experience of finding it sucked was kind of a pointless exercise because the outcome was already known.
Ouch. Bit harsh, maybe.
It's definitely blunt, purely analytical, you might say.
And finally, the presidential rankings.
The AI perceives what it calls human emotional bias, like the affection for George W. Bush despite the policy critiques, or labeling Harding as the dumbest president. The AI flags these as potentially emotional judgments rather than purely data-driven ones.
Wow. Okay, this AI critique really does throw things into sharp relief, doesn't it? It
Yeah.
forces you to think about objectivity.
Definitely.
And the role of that personal perspective in historical analysis, especially when it's presented online by a human expert, someone with feelings and, yes, biases.
It makes you, the listener, think about how critically you engage. Are you just absorbing facts, or are you also considering the presenter's frame, their potential biases, their emotional responses?
Yeah, it reinforces that idea that becoming truly well-informed isn't passive. It involves evaluating the source, the framing, the consistency.
Whether that source is a passionate human or a, well, dispassionate AI, both have their lenses, their ways of processing information.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Mr. Beat's world and the AI's rather sharp critique, we've really seen how information gets processed and presented in very different ways.
It's a reminder that knowledge isn't monolithic. It's often a mosaic, built from different perspectives. Understanding the source, its viewpoint, its potential biases, human or otherwise, is crucial.
Absolutely. Which leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener. Given these diverse approaches we've explored today, the engaged human historian, the analytical AI, what criteria do you now apply when you're seeking to become truly well-informed in this age, absolutely saturated with online information and so many differing viewpoints?